The Carter family felt hopeful when they moved into apartment 3B. After living for years in a loud, crowded downtown place, this new building felt open and calm. Sunlight filled the living room. Mark, a freelance graphic designer, placed his laptop near the window. Elena, who worked part-time at a library, unpacked boxes of books and felt relaxed. Their 8-year-old son, Leo, was shy, but had already made a small connection. He liked Jake, a college student living next door in apartment 3A with his grandfather, Mr. Peterson. Their first week passed smoothly. In the afternoons, Mark often heard soft classical music coming through the wall from Mr. Peterson's apartment. Elena would greet the retired teacher in the hallway and notice the smell of old books and peppermint tea drifting from his door. Every morning, Leo stood by the window, waiting for Jake to wave from the kitchen in 3A. That simple gesture made Leo feel safe. One Wednesday, Mark left early to visit his favorite coffee shop. As he locked his door, he noticed something strange. The door to apartment 3A was slightly open, not wide, just a thin, dark line. He stopped for a moment. The familiar, warm smell was gone. Cold air came out instead, empty and lifeless. Mark assumed they were just airing the apartment and walked away. That evening, the door was still open the same way. The hallway felt heavy. There was no music. No light under the door. "I didn't see Mr. Peterson today," Elena said while serving dinner. Leo looked up from his plate. His face was serious. "Jake didn't wave this morning." Mark felt a tight feeling in his chest. Later that night, after Leo fell asleep, Mark stepped into the hallway and stared at the narrow darkness. He knocked gently. "Mr. Peterson?" The door moved inward with almost no effort. Mark froze. Inside, the apartment was completely empty. All the furniture was gone. The bookshelves, rugs, everything removed. The floors were bare and clean. The walls were plain white and smelled strongly of chemicals as if they had just been painted. The kitchen had no appliances. The bathroom looked unused and hollow. It didn't feel like people had moved out. It felt like no one had ever lived there. Mark slowly stepped back and closed the door. When he returned to 3B, their new home no longer felt safe. Elena looked at his face and understood without words. They both glanced toward Leo's room. This wasn't a normal move. It was a total removal, and one frightening question stayed with them in their new beginning. Who had erased their neighbors, and why? The emptiness from apartment 3A no longer felt like just missing noise. It felt heavy, like pressure pushing through the shared wall. The next morning, Mark called the building manager, Miss Gable. Her voice sounded friendly and professional. "The Petersons? Yes, of course," she said. "There was a sudden family move out of state. Very unfortunate. They handled everything properly, paid the fees, and left the apartment perfectly clean. They were ideal tenants." "Did they leave a new address?" Mark asked, trying to sound relaxed. "Our son was friends with Jake. He wanted to send a card." There was a short pause. "No, they didn't," she replied. "Everything happened very fast. There were privacy concerns." Her voice became cooler. "The matter is finished. I wouldn't think about it further." Elena decided to try another way. She baked banana bread, hoping it would give her a reason to talk to neighbors. The young woman in apartment 2A opened her door only a little, her eyes nervous. Before Elena could say anything, the woman spoke quickly. "I didn't notice anything. I sleep with headphones." Then she shut the door. The lock clicked. Farther down the hall, Elena saw the young man from 4B struggling with his keys. "Hi, I'm Elena from 3B, she said. "Strange about the Petersons, right?" He didn't look at her. His shoulders were tight. "Didn't know them," he muttered, opening his door and slipping inside without another word. In the basement laundry room, Elena met an elderly woman folding sheets very carefully. She offered her some banana bread and tried again. "It feels different without Mr. Peterson's music." The woman stopped folding. She didn't raise her head. "This is a good building," she said softly. "Best place to mind your own business. Don't go searching where you shouldn't." She grabbed her basket and hurried upstairs. The rejection felt cold and sharp. That night, after Leo fell asleep, Mark and Elena whispered tensely in the living room. "We should call the police," Mark said, pacing. "An old man and a child don't just disappear and leave behind a perfectly empty apartment. Something is wrong." "And tell them what?" Elena replied, her voice tight. "That our neighbors moved out neatly? That the manager won't talk? That people don't want to answer questions? We just moved in, Mark. We'll look unstable. What if we get into trouble? What if we upset the wrong people?" She didn't explain who they were. Both of them felt it. Their fear began to affect Leo. He stopped playing in the hallway. He held tightly to Elena when they walked to the car. At night, he came into their room saying he dreamed about the empty black square. His drawings changed too. The bright colors disappeared. Now he drew the same dark shape again and again, pressing the black crayon so hard the paper tore. Lying awake, Mark and Elena replayed their short memories. Had Mr. Peterson really been kind, or just nervous? Was Jake just a shy student, or someone hiding? The new life they had hoped for now felt unstable. 3 days later, the feeling of being watched took shape. A moving van arrived. By evening, a man named Paul had moved in to 3A. He introduced himself with a firm handshake and an empty smile. He said he was a consultant who worked from home. Paul always seemed to appear at the right moments. When Mark left for coffee, Paul was checking his mail. "Early start today?" he would say. When Elena and Leo returned, Paul entered just behind them. "Ah, the student is back," he joked. His questions sounded friendly but felt sharp. "You work flexible hours, Mark. Do you travel much? Leo goes to a good school. Any activities after class?" Nothing he did was openly threatening, but it never stopped. Their apartment no longer felt safe. It felt exposed. Apartment 3A was no longer empty. It now held someone who watched, smiled, and remembered details. The mystery was no longer distant. It lived across the hall. And the Carters no longer felt like people searching for answers. They felt like the next ones being studied. Paul, living in apartment 3A, turned the Carters' home into a place where they always felt watched. They heard his vacuum running at strange times. His television stayed on with low, unclear sound. Every step in the hallway made them stop and listen, waiting for his friendly knock or his overly cheerful voice. Their apartment no longer felt private. It felt like a stage, and Paul was the only person watching. This pressure changed them. Mark became overly alert, jumping at normal building sounds. Elena knew she had to find answers, but not inside the building. She didn't trust the cameras, the internet, or Paul's job title. Consultant could mean anything. On Saturday, Elena casually told Paul, who was washing his car in the parking lot, that she was taking Leo to the Science Museum. Instead, she drove across town to the Central Library, a huge public place where no one paid attention and the Wi-Fi was open. She sat at a computer and started with their building's address. She searched old records, business files, and property documents. About 15 years back, something changed. The building had once been owned by a company called Century Holdings. The name felt familiar. She searched deeper. Century Holdings was not just a security company. It collected and analyzed data. Old news articles appeared. Century accused of illegal data collection. The stories talked about a lawsuit by privacy groups. Then another article followed. Case settled, details sealed. After that, nothing. The story disappeared. In a small tech blog discussing the case, Elena found something important. The investigation had started because of a former Century data worker who reported the company. The person's name was hidden, but the blog said the whistleblower later withdrew from public life. Elena understood what that meant. The person hadn't just stepped away, they vanished. Her heart raced. She searched for images connected to the case. Most photos showed lawyers and company leaders. Then she saw him. In a picture of protesters outside a courthouse, one man stood apart, holding a folder tightly. His face looked tense and alert. The caption mentioned privacy protests. The man was a younger Mr. Peterson. The library suddenly felt suffocating. Elena finally understood. Arthur Peterson wasn't only a retired teacher, he was someone who tried to expose a powerful company and was forced to disappear, living under a new identity, until something went wrong. She searched for Jake Peterson next. His social media was locked, but his academic work was public. He was studying computer science. His research focused on weaknesses in old data systems. Online forum posts under his name discussed encryption and uncovering hidden company records. Jake wasn't just a shy student. He was using modern tools to dig up his grandfather's past. Everything came together in her mind. Arthur had the original story. Jake had the technical skills. They were working together to reopen a fight that had failed years ago. And someone had reached them first. That night, Elena told Mark everything. They spoke in the bathroom with the fan running, hoping it would block sound. Mark felt a dangerous mix of fear and anger. He needed proof. He needed to see who they were dealing with. He told Elena he was going for a drive. Instead, he parked near a strip mall close to their building. Soon, Paul's car drove past, not toward any store, but toward an all-night diner. Mark followed and parked across the street. Through the diner window, he saw Paul sit in a back booth. Another man was already there, older, broad, serious, wearing a dark coat. Paul spoke carefully, no friendliness at all, like someone giving a report. The man listened, nodded once, and slid a plain white envelope across the table. Paul took it and placed it inside his jacket. No food was touched. This wasn't a meeting between friends, it was a job exchange. Mark drove home shaking. When he entered the apartment, he looked at Elena. He didn't need to explain. Paul wasn't just an odd neighbor. He was part of something organized. The envelope proved it. Arthur and Jake Peterson hadn't simply moved away. They had been removed because they were becoming a threat again. And now the Carters had learned the truth. Their search was over. But the truth had noticed them. The truth was clear and frightening. Century Holdings no longer existed, but its work continued through many hidden companies. One of them now owned their building. Arthur Peterson and Jake had not moved away. They had been removed. Their apartment was not just cleaned, it was carefully erased, like evidence after a mistake. Paul was never a neighbor. He was there to control the situation. And now the Carters were the problem he had to stop. 2 nights later, it ended in the underground parking garage. Mark was putting groceries into the car when Paul stepped out from behind the concrete pillars. His friendly behavior was gone. His face showed nothing. "We need to finish this, Mark," Paul said. "We have nothing to discuss," Mark replied. "You do now." Paul handed him a single paper. It listed a large amount of money, so much it made Mark dizzy. It promised to cancel their lease, remove all penalties, and give them an excellent reference. At the bottom was the condition: they had to sign a strict secrecy agreement and leave the apartment within 72 hours. "This is insane," Mark said, his hands shaking. "This is for your family's safety," Paul replied flatly. "Some stories must stay closed. This is the only way. Sign, pack, leave. This offer ends tomorrow." There was no room to argue. This was not a discussion, it was an order. That night, Mark and Elena sat at the kitchen table, staring at the paper like it might explode. They had no proof, only a picture, a theory, and a deep sense of danger. If they fought, they might disappear next. If they accepted the money, they would erase themselves, just like the Petersons. They looked toward Leo's room. The decision made itself. Their new beginning lasted only 23 days. They signed the papers. They packed in a rushed, wordless panic. They told their families a cheerful lie about a sudden job offer in another state. Miss Gable smiled and waved as they left. Life afterward was calmer, wealthier, and empty. Their new city was nice. Their house was bigger. The money helped, but they were no longer the same. Mark startled whenever a door opened nearby. Elena spent hours removing their names from online records. Leo stopped drawing stars and spaceships. Now he only drew blank windows in brick walls, filling them with careful gray shapes. He didn't cry, he just drew. They were safe because they stayed silent, but their new life did not feel peaceful. It felt like holding air in their lungs for too long. The secret stayed with them, heavy and buried deep. The hopeful family who once unlocked apartment 3B no longer existed. They were erased, just like the Petersons. What remained were 3 people who understood the cost of safety and how thin the line is between a home and a perfectly empty place.